2, 1, go.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Nottingham City Place-Based Partnership Share and Learn. This is the second in our third series of these Share and Learn events. I'm delighted this afternoon to welcome Bobby Lowen, who's the Programme Director for our Changing Futures programme, which is part of one of our programmes to support people experiencing multiple disadvantage to live longer and healthier lives. And Bobby's going to talk us through the Changing Futures programme this afternoon, give you a bit of an update as to where we've come, as where we're up to within this 3-year programme. As always, we do the 20-minute presentation format with 10 minutes questions at the end. So we'll try and keep Bobby to 20 minutes. There's a Q&A tab at the top of your screen, so please remember to post your questions throughout, and then we'll pose those to Bobby at the end of his presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Bobby.
Great, thanks Rich, and thanks everybody for joining us to listen to me talk about severe multiple disadvantage and changing futures this afternoon. And yeah, thanks Rich for giving me an audience. Just put my slides on screen. Is that available? Can you see that now? Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so there are a few things that I wanted to cover this afternoon. So I just want to start by reminding people what severe multiple disadvantage is. I want us to look at the system, how the system currently responds to help people experiencing SMD, where we're up to, and the gaps and challenges we've got in our system, but also to reflect on how we've been dealing with those and the opportunity for further development through the Changing Futures programme. So I thought I'd start with this. So just a reminder, I know that not everybody is familiar with severe multiple disadvantage as a term. It's a fairly new concept and not particularly well established as yet. So SMD refers to 3 or more of the 5 issues on the screen there. So homelessness, substance misuse, mental health, contact with criminal justice or domestic violence. And these are kind of related issues that often come together as a kind of a cause and consequence of each other. And they can work together to compound the individual disadvantages that people face. So there isn't a great deal of information yet on the kind of prevalence of SMD, but there is one report now, perhaps a little bit old, which put Nottingham as 8th highest in terms of the proportion of our population who are experiencing SMD. More recent estimates that we've got through our kind of local analysis, we think we've got around 6,600 people in the city within that population. And we know that people who are experiencing SMD also experience much worse health outcomes compared with the rest of the population. So we see really high rates of chronic illnesses, COPD, cardiovascular problems, high prevalence of mental ill health, and ultimately we see much shortened life expectancy. So to give that some context, the average age of death of people who've been engaged in city-based SMD programs so far has just been 43 years, which I think really speaks to the vulnerability of this group of people. We also know that people who experience SMD have often had difficulties in their early childhood. I think that's important. There's still some traction with the idea that issues like substance misuse relate to choice, and I guess from that an implication about entitlement to healthcare and other services. I think this finding at least shows that choices are at least dependent to some extent on the life experiences that people have had. So if we want a health system and a wider public sector that works for all of the population and prioritises people who are most vulnerable, then we really need to think about SMD. And our leaders in the system have been listening to that and have endorsed that view. So what you've got on screen at the moment, the priorities for the place-based partnership, and we can see there that they'd established a priority around improving the lives of people who are experiencing SMD. And also more recently, we've got in the relaunch of the city's joint health and wellbeing strategy, one of the 4 top priorities in the strategy is around helping people who experience SMD in their lives, and that's alongside much more established public health issues like smoking, like maintaining a healthy weight. So we've got real evidence there of strategic buy-in and the kind of recognition that we need to help people experiencing SMD in our system. So we also know that people who are experiencing SMD often have difficulty getting the help that they need, and that could be a number of things coming together: stigma, fear or mistrust of public services, exclusions based on behaviour and so on. But it's also often just simply based on the problems that people have interacting with a number of services that they might need to engage with at the same time, particularly where they've got the other challenges in their life kind of compromising their ability to do that. So if people are homeless and don't have accommodation, no address, dealing with mental health, organising and keeping appointments is that much more difficult. And the support that we provide doesn't always kind of come together in a complementary way. In a way that would allow someone's total needs to be met. So we've been doing some investigation and really backed by that kind of place-based partnership commitment, and with the place-based partnership as conveners to think with system partners about the things that we need to do in our system. Apologies that this slide is a little bit smaller. I'll follow it with which clarifies in a moment or two. We had a few workshops that were run to try and think about system challenges and gaps and issues, and also to think about root causes. And it was a real collaborative effort. So we had commissioners and planners, service providers and people in management and delivery roles across a range of services across the system: GPs, nurses, housing staff and so on. And we also had people who had their own lived experience of SMD contributing to that research and understanding. And this is what we came up with. So in partner services, some of the problems, partners weren't always aware of, mainstream services of what SMD is, weren't able to recognise SMD or to respond in the right way. We often found that services were set up primarily to deal with single issues, whether that's mental health or housing. And so we're kind of narrowly focused on those when actually people needed a kind of a wider response that brought everything together at the same time. And also arrangements in sort of mainstream services that are fine for most people, but that people experiencing SMD could find exclusionary. So kind of opt-in arrangements, difficulties accessing appointments, thresholds, those sorts of things. And also between services, we found that we were doing our best to work with people, but not always together at the same time, or not in a kind of a complementary way. And really that kind of relates to efficiency as well. So we had lots of staff trying to work with people, but working with people separately. And overall kind of a lack of ownership of someone's overall situation and outcomes because of the kind of the narrow kind of focus on these different issues separately. And really those kind of relate back to the way that services are planned and commissioned. And I guess just in terms of the consequences that had, so for people and patients, really, that meant poor experience of support. So trying to work with too many people, too many assessments, having to recount quite traumatic events in their lives. And disjointed care and support, poor outcomes. So across all partners, kind of issues, but really kind of not being able to help people in the way we'd liked, and people feeling kind of trapped in their situations. And so for system partners, what has that meant? So greater use of more reactive and emergency services, typically higher cost services as well. And quite high failure related or repeat demand. So people kind of circulate the system and not ever really being effectively helped to kind of improve their situations. And between us, really kind of inefficient use of the resources and the collective efforts that are held within the system. So we're not starting from scratch here. There's a programme called Opportunity Nottingham. I hope that some people are familiar with that programme that we've benefited from in the city for the last 8 years. Existing programme that was being funded by the lottery direct to the voluntary sector, and that's been working to support people who are experiencing SMD, and really to try and be the glue between statutory services and to try and help coordinate the care and support that people receive. And we've learned a lot through that programme, both in terms of kind of learning, but also in direct delivery. So we've got navigator roles that have been introduced that are about supporting engagement, working to understand the needs that people have, and also to try and be that link to statutory services. So to work on someone's behalf to try and plan their care in a complementary way. And we've also got a multidisciplinary team that's been set up in recent years, and that's a forum for partner organisations, operational partners, to come together to organise people's care where they're struggling, I suppose, as individual partners to provide the help that they need. And really strong lived experience input throughout that programme. So really learning from people who've been there, who tell us what they need. It's also been a really strong learning aspect of that programme. So, I'd really encourage people to go and look at this. I'll provide the link at the end, but there's a real resource there around issues faced by people experiencing multiple disadvantage and things that help that's worth looking at. And also a practice development unit. So this is kind of all of that learning packaged up as training and resources that are available to partner organisations. Any partner organisation working with somebody who is experiencing multiple disadvantage is able to join that. So again, I'd really kind of encourage you to go and have a look at the resources and the training, free training that is available through that system. And that's something we'll be carrying on through Changing Futures too. Okay, so the next part of the presentation is really around where we want to go next and where Changing Futures fits in. So we were coming up to perhaps a year and a half until the end of the delivery of Opportunity Nottingham, which ends the end of this month. I think there was concern around partners and across the system about the continuation of what had happened and the developments we've made, and also real worry about just the loss of that operational support that we'd had through Opportunity Nottingham, like the navigator post that we had working with people. And so at that point, the government announced a new programme, which is about supporting public services to work together to help people who are experiencing SMD. And within that programme, a real focus on sustainable improvements. So not just doing something for the 2-year term of the programme, but actually making changes so that our services, our resources held across the system work together in a better way for people for the long term. And so we had the strategic buy-in through the place-based partnership and the health and wellbeing strategy. And we have the learning and practice that Opportunity Nottingham have given us over the past 8 years. And on top of that, we had a really kind of strong partnership coming together around SMD. So we had all the materials for a successful bid, and we were able to kind of secure some resource to continue with this programme, one of 15 areas across the UK, and around about £4 million that we've received in the city to run this two-year programme. And that's allowed us to do two things. So the first is that we won't have that cliff edge. So come the end of this month, I'm relieved to say that we won't be losing a great deal of staff that are kind of working between the city partners to help people. So we get to keep a lot of the operational delivery, but we're also using the programme to presenting it really as a kind of a vehicle to build on that learning and understanding of how to support people through Opportunity Nottingham, and to use it to influence system change to hit that longer term strategic objective set by the place-based partnership. So this is what our programme looks like. I'm not going to run through it in a fantastic level of detail. I think it'd probably take a while to do that, but these are the kind of the core elements that we've got in place. And we're keeping a lot of the approach really that was established under Opportunity Nottingham. So there shouldn't be a massive change really in what we're doing in some respects, certainly not on the operational side, although there are some new components to the programme that I just want to quickly talk through. So the first specialist navigator roles. Now, we understood through the delivery of Opportunity Nottingham that we weren't really reaching out to the diverse need that's held right across the city, and in particular, people from minority ethnicities and women and people experiencing domestic violence and abuse were really underrepresented in the Opportunity Nottingham programme. So we wanted to change that. So we've got new navigators that will be working within specialist partner organisations, so Al Haraya, POW and Juno Women's Aid, to make the links to those communities and to support people into the programme. But they're also going to have a learning brief, so we really want them to be able to feed back on the types of issues and challenges that people face, so that we can develop our plans and make sure arrangements are better going forward. We've also got some really interesting new roles. So we knew that there were parts of our system that people experiencing SMD really rely upon. And we wanted to make sure that they were able to kind of build their capacity to support people experiencing SMD, really kind of part of our system change approach. So we've got specialist practitioners that will be embedded within each of the organisations that you see on screen. And that's around offering kind of capacity building and support, not just about kind of accountability and saying you must do these things for people experiencing SMD. In order to be sustainable, we also really need to understand the pressures and challenges that those different service areas face. So we'll be working to try and think about their priorities and what they're able to do, and really to kind of shape the future so that they kind of work in a better way for people who are experiencing SMD. We'll have a new analyst appointment. So over on the right here, we've got our Learning and Development Hub, and we have kind of a research function, and we have some great resources already. But I think what we really need to do is to also think about kind of the impact. And I said at the start, there's not a great deal of information out there around people experiencing SMD. It's not well established, for example, as a public health measure. That's something that we really want to change. So we've got somebody who will be hosted within the population health management team to try and understand the impact of what we're doing a bit better, and to package that up so we're able to sort of explain to different partners that will be working with us. And it's also about building on that recognition around SMD and the kind of credibility, having it as something that we find interesting, important to us within the kind of the mainstream structures of our health system. And finally, and this is a really important post that we put together, we know that we're only going to be able to run for two more years, not even quite 2 more years. So the system change ambition is really central to what we're doing. And we know from a lot of the research that we've done that a lot of the problems that we think we see in the system are around how partners come together to use their resources, and the kind of gaps in services that creates, and the lack of overall ownership for people's outcomes, even when they affect right across different partners' own kind of core interests and outcomes. So we'll have a system change commissioner who has recently joined us, who will be looking to work with those partner organisations to think about how their resources might be used to get better outcomes by trying to do things in a more collaborative way. Okay, so I'm going to finish with this really. So this is kind of the overall goal and ambition of what we're trying to achieve here. So if we think about the current system as really relying on individual people, and we've got them at the centre of the diagram there, to make their own links to the different services and support that they might need, we know that hasn't been working for us, and it's not getting the right outcomes for people, and it's not getting the right outcomes for us as system partners as well. So really what we want to do through the programme is to shape the way that the system works, so that actually that support and all those resources kind of come together to work around people, and so we see much better kind of interaction in the way services are planned and delivered that really kind of work to help people in the right way. And we'll be doing that through the programme, through the operational elements that we set out, the kind of the navigator posts, and the use of the multidisciplinary team, which will continue. We'll also really be doing that system planning, commissioning work to really think about for the long term how we reuse our resources together in a better way. So I'll stop there. I think just shy of the 20-minute slot, so maybe a bit more time for questions, which would be great. We're open for referrals now, so I've put a link, an email address there. If you think you're working with somebody who's experiencing SMD, please email that address. The team will guide you through how you can make an referral, advise you on whether or not your referral is appropriate, and so on, and be that link. I've also put some resources up there. I've had to whistle through a little bit. There's loads of information on the Opportunity Nottingham website. That's the outgoing programme, and also on the national Making Every Adult Matter coalition, which has got the national learning around severe multiple disadvantage. So please do take a look there. And of course, please email me if you've got any more questions. Very happy to pick up queries. Over to you, Rich.
That's great. Thank you very much, Bobby. Really comprehensive overview of the programme. Just a reminder to everybody to post your questions in the Q&A box. But Bobby, just to kick off, you talked about the involvement of people with lived experience within the programme. Could you say a little bit more about how people with lived experience have been involved with this programme and what you think the benefit's been?
Absolutely. I did that. I'm afraid I've kind of covered it as a bit of a light touch just to try and fit the time, but it is a really central part of the programme and what we've been able to do. And it sort of started with Opportunity Nottingham, but it's absolutely something that we plan on strengthening through Changing Futures. And so, I think that it's a different perspective on what involvement of people with lived experience is about. Some partners might see that as an obligation, something that they should be doing. And actually, I think the way that we look at it is that it's something that really helps us to make decisions in the right way. You learn such an amount from people who've been in those situations beforehand. So they're really kind of working as partners. And I don't just kind of mean that as a sort of in a light way. It really is kind of embedded throughout every aspect of the programme. So we've got a delivery aspect. So we've got peer mentors who will be working alongside navigators, and that's really offering a kind of an example to people of what can be achieved. So they've got their own lived experience and they can say, look, I've been there, and support with engagement. And I mentioned fear and mistrust, so that's really sort of significant. And then we've got a lived experience team, which is about making sure that people are involved in, people with lived experience are involved throughout the programme. Part of that team, we've got beneficiary ambassadors, so they're people who have their own lived experience, who work at a kind of a more senior level. They're paid roles to challenge us sometimes and to offer advice on their experiences and to feed into decision making. And now we've recently set up an experts by experience board as well, and it's very much intended that that will work alongside and with our partnership board for the programme to make sure that the views of lived experience are well represented. There's loads of ways that people have been involved. So just to give a few kind of practical examples, we've been concerned with mobilisation at the moment. So we've had people with lived experience feeding into the design of services, having content in their service specifications, setting out values about the way that kind of services that matter to them so they can be incorporated into service specifications. We've had involvement in recruitment. So we've had people kind of sitting on panels and asking questions of people who put themselves forward to be part of the delivery of the programme. And similarly in the procurement of services, so they've set questions, they've been part of the scoring process that we get providers who understand and kind of work to the things that they think are important.
That's great. Thank you, Bobby. And we've had a further question which asks, can we add social value to the programme by recruiting from within our most deprived communities where possible? I think you've probably covered that in your response there, people with lived experience. We've had another question come in specifically around primary care, actually, and how we can get a better understanding within primary care about the role of the Changing Futures programme and how we can better understand SMD within primary care. Your thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, sure. So we've actually, it's one of the embedded posts that we've got is going to be working and is actually currently working within primary care to try and advise them on again, kind of recognising and supporting people who are experiencing SMD. So that post is about kind of connection between our programme and primary care and kind of capacity building within primary care. So, you know, a range of things that they could potentially do. I mentioned the practice development unit. That's all the kind of training resources that we've got. That role could, for example, look at how those training resources can be tailored to the specific needs of people who are working in primary care so that they can do that job of recognising when people are coming in and, you know, how to make kind of practical adjustments so that they can support them in the right way. They'll also be working to make sure that referrals are made in the right way. So, you know, if we've got people that primary care are struggling to help with who have related issues of substance misuse or homelessness and, you know, all those kind of contributing disadvantages, that they can understand how to make a referral into the programme so they can connect with the kind of the wider partnership support that's out there. We're actually going to be working on this. The plans are to run a bit of a workshop in the near future with people who are interested in primary care and SMD, try and think about those areas that perhaps need some development and look at kind of resources and help and what we can do over the term of the programme to help build that capacity. I hope that answered.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Bobby. And yeah, it'd be good for us to I guess promote that within our primary care colleagues, particularly those who are on the call here today. We've had another question about lived experience come in, and the question is, does lived experience also include family and carers, as they're often forgotten and their experiences can really impact on support available moving forward, both of them as family members, but also as an individual experience of supporting people with SMD?
That is actually a really good challenge, and I wonder if we're kind of looking at that as much as we have to. I mean, I think we probably could do more on that, is probably the truth about it, or at least I don't understand the extent to which that's being covered at the moment. It's interesting, we had the Opportunity Nottingham final event last week, and I think a lot of the people who came to talk at that event were people with lived experience, and they talked about sort of establishing kind of new family and kind of, you know, through the programme, people that they could kind of rely on. And sometimes you're going to hear that people are a bit kind of, you know, some of those relationships have broken down. But I think, you know, I know from sort of my previous work that actually kind of some of the way of kind of helping people is to kind of re-establish priorities and things that they matter to them in their life. So families is probably something that we should consider more. I think that's a good point of feedback. And apologies if I've not done justice to some of the work that we're already doing there. Not
at all. We're squeezing quite a lot into a short period of time, and perhaps one for the Experts by Experience board to consider as well. So you've talked about Opportunity Nottingham quite a bit, and I think some people will probably be wondering what the difference is. So what do you think the sort of key differences are between Opportunity Nottingham and Changing Futures?
So I think Opportunity Nottingham did also start out with that system change objective. And Opportunity Nottingham was one of a number of programmes that are funded through a national programme called Fulfilling Lives. And I expect that what happened is that system change is hard. It's quite a difficult thing to persuade partners, particularly when it's kind of linked into voluntary organisations, almost lobbying kind of statutory organisations for development and change. And so we were kind of coming to the term of the programme, and that was going to be a bit of a problem to be solved. I think that the government has introduced Changing Futures to help solve that problem, and they've ramped up the focus on system change, which is something that we wanted to do locally anyway. Our place-based partnership predates Changing Futures. That's going to be real focus of our programme. So we know we've got a lot of the operational delivery elements working really well. NOTS has given us that, and we've got a lot of the learning there as well. It's about how we carry that message over to system partners. It's about working with system partners to recognise that kind of common and shared interest. And that's why we've got those roles like the System Change Commissioner, like the people in embedded posts that are explicitly there to try and bring about those kind of changes. So that's the kind of key difference, I think. The emphasis is really ramped up on the sort of system change. We've got a further 2 years. We need to get that sorted out.
That's great. Thanks, Bobby. That's really, really clear. So you've talked about the Insight and Learning Hub and the analyst who's going to be embedded within the integrated care system. We've had another question that come in that says, do we have a sense of what austerity is going to do with this already vulnerable cohort? It must be worrying, both in terms of people experiencing SMD and the likely growing numbers. And do we think that there's an opportunity to try and be proactive in this area and thinking about how Changing Futures might be able to help create that evidence base for change?
That's a really good question. I think, yes, worried. I think that, we know that kind of SMD, so if we look at Nottingham and being 8th highest, we know that Nottingham as a city has a sort of relative deprivation compared with a lot of other local authority areas. So they kind of come together. And I think, the idea of the programme, Changing Futures, an Opportunity Nottingham before it, is to be flexible to beneficiaries' needs. So it's to try and find support and assistance where they need it. And we know that one of the things that has been particularly challenging for people in accessing services is the expectation to travel around for various appointments. And, I think probably trying to streamline people's care and support and some of the funding that navigators working within the programme might have to be able to sort of smooth things over with people might help in that area. I don't think it's going to cover every aspect of the challenges that the country is facing at the moment. I think that is quite a concern. I guess it's no surprise as well that financial vulnerability is one of the other priorities that's been included in the health and wellbeing strategy. I think as a city, we need to really focus on that too.
Thank you, Bobby. Okay, we've just had another question come in that says, how are system partners proactively recruiting patients to the programme, or I guess service users also? Patients or service users with SMD can be hard to identify and sometimes slip under the radar. So how are we currently identifying people who be eligible for the programme, for support from the programme?
So it builds on some of what Opportunity Nottingham has in place. So we are kind of, working off some knowledge out there already about kind of referrals and being able to link into the programme. But we don't get them from all quarters. And I think some partners are better than others. So, housing and particularly supported housing, quite a close relationship there. I'm sure we do get quite a few more referrals that are coming through that route. We mentioned primary care earlier. I'm not certain that primary care could recognise at the moment in the way that they kind of record or recognise severe multiple disadvantage, or would really know or have time actually to make referrals. That's the idea of the embedded post, and it's the same with the guys who are working for patient and within the mental health system. It's about building that kind of understanding, and so they're working to try and spread the message within their own organisations. I should say that the delivery part of the programme is really quite new at the moment, so we haven't pushed that very hard, but it will be kind of coming more and more, particularly as we see the switch over from Opportunity Nottingham to Changing Futures at the start of next month. But yeah, I think they're there to try and figure out how to recognise people within those services and to support those partners to make the referrals through, whatever that takes, if that's coding, if it's about streamlined referrals, they're kind of there to do that.
Thank you, Bobby. Okay, we're almost out of time. I think we've got time for one final question, and that is, Changing Futures is obviously a time-limited program. What do you think success looks like for Changing Futures by the end of the program in 2024?
A really interesting question, and I think, you know, we've kind of been working on the mobilisation. Big focus of the programme very shortly will be working with the partner organisations, commissioning funding organisations to think about the kind of the different options around this. I would love to think that we have kind of really comprehensive delivery of a programme that works around SMD. I think, you know, we're going to have to look at the different options with partners there. I'd certainly want to see within the mainstream services much better recognition. And I also think that there are some shared infrastructure elements that absolutely work in a better way. You know, we know that kind of navigator roles have done a really good job in kind of linking people with various types of support. We know that the MDT is an incredibly useful tool for different partners to kind of come together and use. So success for me would be really kind of establishing it, building on the priorities that we've got, building on that learning and practice so that it really happens on the ground, so that much broader partner recognition of this, much broader partnership working around this for the future. I hope that's not too general.
No, not at all. Thank you, Bobby. It's really clearly laid out. Okay, all right, and thank you for taking the questions, and thank you to everyone for posting your questions this afternoon. Thanks, Bobby, for the presentation. And I think we will. This will be. Well, it's been recorded and will be available on YouTube. And I think that you put some further information in the slides that were shared during your presentation as well, so people can find out more through those resources. But thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. And I think we'll see you in a few weeks' time for our next Share and Learn, which will be on our Care Leavers programme. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks.
Thanks all.